The fact that they did not just take this guy apart and instead held him for the police.
We can't let this rip us apart. We can't let our rule of law turn into sort of an eye for an eye.
For the fourth time in 4 days, President Trump is calling the investigation a witch hunt.
There's been no notification of any investigation. Nothing's changed since James Comey said the president was not a target or a subject of investigation. Nothing's changed.
A U.S. fighter jet shooting down a Syrian warplane. The U.S. military says the action was taken after the pro-Assad military jet dropped bombs.
America's top tech bosses expected to meet with President Trump today to talk about modernizing the government's technology.
This for the U.S. Open. Koepka, a major champion.
Straight to a Fox News alert, another deadly attack rocking London overnight.
One person dead, 10 others injured after police say a man filled with rage used that white van to mow down worshipers leaving a mosque.
Wow. The 48-year-old suspect is in custody, now undergoing a psychiatric evaluation. Benjamin Hall is live on the scene in London with new details unfolding at this hour. Benjamin, the sun's up the day after another terror attack.
Yeah, Brian, Stephen Ainsley, look, these just keep coming. London constantly being attacked at the moment. But of course, what makes this attack, which took place just in the street behind me here, what makes it so strikingly different is that this was for the first time a vehicle-borne attack on Muslims. And of course, we've become almost used to seeing it the other way around. But this really shocking in this very diverse community where we're at now. And the police are coming out. They're saying they're treating it as a terrorist act and that it will be charged under the counter-terrorism group. It happened just after midnight last night as worshippers were leaving a Muslim centre in Finchley, North London. They had just left their Ramadan prayers and were making their way home when the man attacked. Now, Muslim leaders have called it a hate crime, and they've asked the public here to stay calm because, of course, this has inflamed tensions in the area, and desperately people were trying to treat the wounded, and we're hearing stories of how they all came together quickly then. Police, as you say, have arrested the driver, a 48-year-old white man. He was grappled to the ground by two bystanders until the police arrived, and the two men who held him down have been called heroes. Eyewitnesses have also reported that he said a number of times, "I've done my bit and I want to kill Muslims."
He did what he did deliberately to hit and kill as many Muslims as possible. So he is a terrorist. So at this stage we are calling for calm.
And video has also now emerged showing the attacker apparently blowing a kiss to passers-by from the back of the police van when he was being taken away. He's been taken to hospital and he is going to be charged when he's discharged. But again, this very diverse multicultural area we're in now, shocked by this event. Back to you guys.
All right, Benjamin Hall in London, where it is the noon hour. Right now, let's bring in Kellyanne Conway, the counselor to President Trump. She joins us live here on the new curvy couch. We understand the White House.
Pretty nice.
Thank you very much. All new.
On the second floor.
Well, I know you went from a couch to a duplex.
Right. Is
that a barista over there?
Kellyanne, regarding what's going on in London,
Yes,
we understand through our producer down there, the White House is tracking the developments.
Yes, they are. In fact, overnight, the president's counterterrorism experts were in touch with their British counterparts. This is being treated, we understand, as an act of terrorism, and the president and his team are fully committed to helping our British allies any way we can with the investigation.
In a way, I sense the British people feel as though they've been left unprotected, and they're almost on some level trying to take things into their own hands, which is a scary response.
And you don't want to feel that anything like this is the, quote, new normal. We remember how that felt here. Other people have encountered that in the Western world. And you don't want to turn on the news, of course, and say another week, another attack as such. But as the events unfold, we will carefully monitor them. And people, you know, Brian, it's a great question. People have to decide whether they adjust their own behavior and their lives, their lifestyles, or whether they never allow the terrorists to win and just forge ahead.
Over the weekend, we got so many emails from our viewers talking about the president being successful in a number of things over the course of the 150 days. Today's 150th day. But we got a lot of emails pushing back on Congress, saying, why aren't the Republicans in Congress getting on board? They were actually giving Democrats credit, saying they're on board, they're loyal to one another, and they're attacking Republicans, and it's working. But what does the president need to do to get Congress on board? Because there are some major issues that need to be passed, too.
You're absolutely right that there's just been so many accomplishments, close to 40 pieces of legislation, these executive orders borders. You saw the president in Miami just on Friday rolling back Cuban policies that President Obama put in there that really benefit the Cuban regime, not the Cuban people. We stand with the Cuban people. We don't want U.S. money to go to the Cuban regime, the military, the intelligence, and then they repress their own people. On Friday, we had the first White House meeting of the Opioid Commission. If you filled up every seat in Yankee Stadium, Ainsley, that's how many people die of drug overdoses in this country a year, 33,000 of them through opioid abuse. So this is, no demographic has been spared, no state has been untouched by this. So you're talking about economic numbers, confidence numbers, rolling back the regulatory framework, getting health care passed in the House. Now, what the president is doing with the Congress is working with Leader McConnell and the others who are drafting the Senate version of the health care bill. They're in very close touch. Everybody knows what those principles are, and we should remind people every day what Obamacare has not done for many Americans. In just the last week or 10 days, we have headlines out of 5 states, Maine, Michigan, North Carolina, New Hampshire. You see that, and Delaware, Joe Biden's Delaware, where one of the insurers has said they want a 1/3 increase in the premiums next year. So we have to remind people why we're trying to solve this problem of Obamacare to begin with. But working with the Congress when we can, doing things through executive order when we can. You're right about the Democrats being unified, but they're unified in opposition. They're hashtag resistance. And we would love to get Democratic votes on health care, on the tax break,
but the Republicans
on infrastructure.
You know, their timetable doesn't seem to be lined up with the president's, because we've heard, okay, they'd like to get something done, you know, in the rearview mirror. They would have already liked to have had the new Obamacare thing on the plate and pass it in the Senate. Now they're saying maybe by the 4th of July, maybe by the end of the summer. When it comes to tax reform, maybe by the end of the year, maybe next year.
Steve, do you know anybody that moves at Donald Trump's pace? Because I've not met them.
Well, the problem for the Republicans in Congress, though, is if they don't get stuff done, they're not going to get a job in 2 years, or less than a year and a half, when everybody's up for re-election in the House.
I don't think anybody's thinking, or they shouldn't be thinking about next year's midterm elections. They should really be thinking about putting the solutions. They ought not to, and here's why. If you do your job well, you get reelected. If people feel like you've had a positive impact on their lives and you've put together the solutions, you've put them forth and you pass in the way the president is doing, then you will get reelected. In the meantime, though, your point is correct in that Washington moves at a very different pace than a disruptor and a businessman like Donald Trump, who's very used to making decisions in the business world, taking account many inputs and insights and ideas, and then weighing the consequences and the actions and executing on them. So when he says drain the swamp, it's not just get rid of all the crocodiles in the water that we don't need there. It's also moving at a different pace. And so we hope that the Congress will do it. I actually feel very positive that we'll get health care and taxes passed this year.
I know there's optimism, but it's going to be a lot of arm twisting. Right now, we understand this week the Democrats might try to shut down the entire Senate and stop all business, just not show up to work because they've not been dealt into the health care deliberations. But did the president really say to Republicans that he thought the House bill was mean? And do you think that is affecting what the Senate's doing?
I wasn't in that particular meeting, and people in the meeting are loath to disclose what was said there. But you saw the president after the House passed health care reform. The first step, big step toward repealing and replacing Obamacare was something better, Brian, that he's very supportive of getting rid of Obamacare and having something in place that actually helps people, especially the people, the same ones he's helping with these new apprenticeship programs, frankly. Those small business owners, the plumbers, and the hairdressers and the farmers, the people who don't benefit from government-sponsored benefits or from employer-sponsored benefits. So he's there to help them. And no, I don't think that that's affecting the Democrats. The Democrats are still affected by the election results. That's very clear. Those who constantly ask, will you accept the election results, clearly still have not. It's hashtag resistance, including Hillary Clinton, who basically plays a game of spin the bottle, who do I blame today? And the faster they get on board with the fact that he's the president and that this is his agenda moving forward, we would love Democratic votes. We're yet to see a single one come up and support the way Democratic senators supported George W. Bush for his big tax overhaul.
So let's talk about what's happening with the president. Going to make a major speech, according to Jay Sekulow, this week, and it will include mostly about Russia. What's the message? I'm going to leave it to the lawyers and move on from here? What do you think his message is, this comprehensive speech he's going to give?
Well, we'll let the president put forth his message, but let's review what he's already said about it. That there's no obstruction of justice, he's not under investigation, there's no collusion, it's a witch hunt. He's made very clear that we've had months and months and months of investigation on top of the FBI, several House and Senate committees investigating the same thing, and you've got people even that have not always been sympathetic towards President Trump.
Like David Brooks of the New York Times.
Openly questioning, where will this lead us? And I want to say something else. We're starting to waste tens of millions of dollars of taxpayer money on this endeavor. And if there's something there, let's hear about it. The president has said, let the investigation go forward. And Jim Comey testified that the president was not under investigation. The president said that Comey had told him that 3 times in the letter he put forward when he removed Mr. Comey from his job. So what are we talking about here, really, when the president is trying to move on with the policies and the solutions of the day? I think this is part of the resistance and the obstruction.
Dallas Woodhouse, you talk about how much money is being wasted on this. Dallas Woodhouse, he agrees with you. He said that politics and government should not matter this much. This is what happens when the government gets too big and there's too much control. Now, yesterday, Chris Wallace was questioning Jay Sekulow, who's President Trump's attorney, and because the president tweeted on Friday, I am being investigated for firing the FBI director by the man who told me to fire the FBI director. Witch hunt. So Chris Wallace was asking Jay, he said, the president's even saying I'm under investigation. Is he under investigation? Jay Wallace said, no, 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 there is no investigation.
Well, and that's the president's personal lawyer. He's saying that nobody has ever notified the president that he's under investigation. In fact, Mr. Comey himself has said that he is not. And what Jay Sekulow went on to say is that that's the president responding to a Washington Post report that included 5 anonymous sources.
Right.
And that's the president in his 140 characters through his significant social media platform, Ainsley, telling everybody, wow, look at the irony here.
Yeah, right. And then you've got the Assistant Attorney General last week, Rod Rosenstein, saying in a memo that was released to the press, it said, essentially, don't believe everything you read in the newspapers, considering they don't reveal the source or the agency or even the country. And then you've got an ABC report. Yesterday, their senior judicial correspondent, Pierre Thomas, said that there has been no decision on whether or not to mount an investigation of President Trump, which is exactly what Jay Sekulow said yesterday.
That's right. And he's the president's personal attorney, so of course he's read into all of this. This is all a conclusion in search of evidence, it seems. And if the president... the president has a right to respond. He has a right to defend himself this way. If you were in a court of law, so the prosecution rests, the defense will now have... There's nothing like that here. You have an FBI director testifying in front of 20 million viewers.
Can I ask you finally, are you as concerned as Newt Gingrich, or is the president as concerned as Newt Gingrich about the makeup of Robert Mueller's team and the Democratic donations that are clearly there and their background?
I think it's relevant information that the public should have. And so if we're going to talk about transparency and accountability and who all the players are here, I think it's relevant that people know that Mr. Mueller's team includes folks who gave significant amounts of money. One person I read gave more money than a single mom makes in over a year just to Hillary Clinton. Speaker Gingrich says that one of them was actually opposing the FOIA request for the Clinton Foundation. So that's relevant information for people to have.
All right. Kellyanne, thank you very much for dropping by.
Thank you, Kellyanne.
Okay, now go back to work in our nation's capital.
I will do that.
She'll be there by noon.
Coming up, one state wants to ban preteens from owning smartphones. Do you think that's a good idea? We report, you decide.
And critics in Congress say it's too hard to pass the president's tax plan. But is it really? Charles Payne here says it's easy.
Come on in, Charles.
That's the way you do it. Get your money for nothing. Get your check.
To pass the president's agenda, but instead, Congress still making excuses for why they're still divided over things like basic tax reform.
Will this hurt the growth we've seen so far since Donald Trump was elected president? Here to weigh in is host of Making Money on the Fox Business Network, Charles Payne. Charles, does it seem to you that the Republican-led Congress is on the same page as the Republican president?
No, because we'd have all those boxes checked by now. Everyone has their own... I heard you guys talking about re-election with Kellyanne, and everyone's got their own agenda, let's face it. And, some of these Republicans are in trouble because in one part they were seduced by former President Obama's Medicaid expansion program. You've got a lot of folks in some of those red states who are now on that. that. They're afraid to touch that. They're afraid to mess with it. And there's some other things going on here as well. So same thing with tax reform. So along the lines, everyone's got their own idea. Listen, now some of them are legitimate differences on how you get things done, but some of them are people trying to preserve their own personal power in their own personal territory.
But look, Ari, I mean, if you're Senator Rand Paul, if you're going to be true to your school, it's going to be really hard to get along with Jeff Flake.
It is, but that's what we do, send lawmakers to Washington, D.C. ultimately
to cut deals?
To compromise and forge the best deal possible. When you do agree that something is awful, when it's unanimous, then you probably could find a way to fix it.
But you know what, Charles? It's hard for the Republicans in the House and the Senate to say, hey, look, you got to vote for us because we want to maintain the majority if they both got the majority and they can't get anything done.
Sure. I mean, it certainly falls on itself. And, you know, when we came in, the question you were asking, can this harm the growth? Because we have seen legitimate, amazing growth in a very short period of time.
But it's on promise of getting something done. Would you agree?
In part, yeah, absolutely. And I would tell you, here's an interesting thing. On Friday, we had the consumer sentiment number out. This is fascinating, guys. I got to share it with you in the audience. So before June 8th, the number was 97.7, which is just to know that's a great number. After June 8th, it was 86.7. What changed? The Comey testimony was on June 8th. Then you think about all these investigations, you think about all the foot dragging, you think about all of the infighting, you think about the lack of Republicans coming through with full-throated support of President Trump, no matter what the issue. You rarely get that. You know, so you start to get a little bit nervous. You and Kellyanne were talking about small businesses, Real quick. Small business optimism, still the best thing out there, holding up. But the guy says, they say small business owners are highly encouraged by President's regulatory reform agenda, and they remain optimistic. So the window's open, but I don't know for how long.
All right, Charles, it's going to be very interesting. Also, Tech Week on Washington, all the CEOs of these big tech companies.
It's going to be interesting with Amazon and Whole Foods do.
All right, now meanwhile, 20 minutes after the hour, Special Counsel Robert Mueller stacking the deck against President Trump. Lifelong Democrat Alan Dershowitz says no doubt he's here next.
Plus, this woman thought she was picking up her dog's toy. Big surprise. Guess what it was? Not a toy.
Fox News alert, all 7 Navy sailors killed on a destroyer have been identified. Most of the crew was sleeping when the USS Fitzgerald collided with a cargo ship near Japan Saturday night. The sailors were found dead in flooded compartments. Still no word on what caused that collision. And more breaking news right now. A U.S. fighter jet shooting down a Syrian warplane. The U.S. military says it happened after the pro-Assad military jet dropped bombs on U.S.-backed fighters near the city of Raqqa. It's the first time the U.S. military has shot down a Syrian aircraft since the U.S. began fighting ISIS in the country in 2014.
But then look at who Mueller's hired. One of the lawyers he brought in has such a record of hiding evidence from the defense. The Supreme Court ruled 9-0 that when that lawyer participated in destroying Arthur Andersen, 85,000 jobs, that it wasn't a crime. But he hid the evidence. He hid the evidence in Enron, and 4 people who were innocent spent a year in jail. Now, you bring in headhunters like that. The first 4 people he brought in, one was a person who had defended the Clinton Foundation against Freedom of Information Act.
You wonder why the president's getting concerned and people around him are alarmed. Meanwhile, does Newt Gingrich really have a point legally? Joining us right now to weigh in is Harvard Law professor, defense attorney, and lifelong Democrat Alan Dershowitz. Mr. Dershowitz, welcome back. Does Newt Gingrich have a point?
He has a point. I think when you have a political prosecution of a sitting president being generated by Democrats, you have to be Caesar's wife. You have to make sure that everybody on that team is neutral, objective, and has a completely clear record. You should not have anybody on that team who made a $1 contribution to the other side. It should be completely neutral. Look, President Trump understood that when he said essentially to Senator Lieberman that maybe he wasn't suited at this time to be head of the FBI because he was a politician, although I think he would have been very well suited. I think he's an extraordinary guy. But you have to, in a partisan atmosphere like this, you have to be so careful not to give the other side the ability to claim prejudice, and I think they have given the other side the ability to claim prejudice in this
For example,
context.
look at Andrew Weissman. He might be the greatest guy in the world, but 2006, he gave $2,000 to the DNC. In 2008, $2,300 to President Obama. James Quarles, 2008, $3,300 to President Obama. In 2015, Chuck Schumer got $1,500. Hillary Clinton, almost $3,000. And Jeannie Rhee, in 2008, $2,300. Hillary Clinton, $2,700. And she got another $2,700 in 2016. So, like you said, Caesar's wife reference, I get it. But in the big picture, when it comes to law, I worry about Robert Mueller and James Comey already been through the fire together. And you know the animus that Comey has. He made it clear he thinks the president's a liar. How can Robert Mueller, Bronze Star and all, sterling reputation as well, honestly be dispassionate?
Well, he can't, especially since he would be called as the first witness by the president if there were a case, having him testify in front of Congress. The president had the right to fire him. The president had the right to make him stop the investigation. The other witness for the president, of course, would be Rothstein, who wrote the memo saying you should fire Comey. So this is becoming very political when you have the Justice Department itself being on both sides, prosecuting the president possibly, and also serving as defense witnesses for the president. This is just becoming too political on both sides. Now you have Republicans saying, lock her up. Let's put the former Attorney General Lynch in jail. We got to stop this. We have to stop criminalizing political differences. The criminal law should be reserved for obvious violations of the criminal law that exists, not for making political points against your political enemies on both sides.
And I hear you, so that really follows up my next topic, is if they call Loretta Lynch to find out what was in this alleged memo to James Comey that forced him in front of center stage to say Hillary Clinton did all these bad things, but I will not recommend prosecution. People still scratch their head on that. Now Republicans are saying, I want to get to the bottom of that. What's your reaction?
Well, I think we have to be objective and neutral on both sides. I would be against an obstruction of justice investigation directed against the Clintons, directed against Lynch. I don't want to see broadening of the obstruction of justice statute on either side. And yet what we have in America today is Republicans trying to expand espionage, trying to expand obstruction of justice to get Democrats trying to expand it to get a Republican. Who are the big losers? We, the American people, our civil liberties, our constitutional rights. The first victim of partisanship is often civil liberties and constitutional rights.
And you can see how the anger is so great it can result when unhinged people end up shooting at congressmen who just want to practice baseball. I believe it's somehow related. This is getting so out of control, especially when you even have anti-Trumpers like David Brooks of the New York Times say, there doesn't seem to be any collusion here. We're going around in circles.
Well, I'll tell you a fascinating story. Just before Rabin was assassinated many years ago, he came to see me. He wanted to meet with me to talk about how the atmosphere in Israel, in which everybody was pointing fingers at everybody else, could result in violence. And look what happened. The Prime Minister of Israel gets assassinated by an extremist who doesn't like the fact that he's trying to make peace. Words count. Words matter. And people can be influenced by words on both sides.
It's always great to get your perspective, Professor. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, 29 minutes after the hour. Straight ahead. From Tim Cook to Jeff Bezos, all the Silicon Valley big shots headed to the White House today. What could possibly go wrong? Chris Liddell, the former Microsoft CFO turned assistant to President Trump, here next. Plus, one state wants to ban preteens from owning smartphones. Is that a good idea? We report, you decide. Can I weigh in and say yes?
Well, the Trump administration is going to huddle with leaders from the largest tech companies today at the White House during the first meeting of the American Technology Council. Led by the president's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, the council's goal is to modernize government services. Good luck.
So what can we expect from the summit? They already got the itinerary.
Well, Chris Liddell is an assistant to the president and the director of strategic initiatives at the White House, and he joins us now. Thank you so much, Chris, for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I know that we're looking at the list. Very impressive, the executives that are on this panel with you. You chose executives from the largest tech companies to help you with this. You say the goal is to modernize government services. What exactly does that mean? What do you want to modernize?
Yeah, so the president is totally committed to making the average person's day-to-day life better. So today's all about bringing the best minds in the country together to focus on services that the tens of millions of citizens rely on every day that are basic but incredibly important to them.
Like what?
Everything from disability benefits for veterans to getting a loan for a small business to applying for a passport, getting social security information. The government provides literally thousands of services to the average citizen, and they rely on them day to day, every day of the year.
So if you are involving the tech people, you would imagine that you're talking about things that people would be able to do online, which currently you can't.
Exactly. So one statistic is the average person spends something like 35 hours a year filling in forms for the government. So if you think about that, that's close to a full working week for the average person. So just bringing those online and making more digitally efficient would be incredibly important. But I think also what we want to do by bringing in the best and smartest minds in the country is what else could we do? It's not about just modernizing what we already do, but think of all the services that the private sector could innovate on if we brought the best minds in the country to bear on improving life for the average citizen.
So, Chris, are we at the point, since we've done this before, are we at the point now where the hellos and I really respect yous are over and the rolling up your sleeves, here's my idea phase is in?
Yeah, this is real hard work, and we've just been incredibly encouraged by the number and quality of people that are coming in. So we have representatives of just about every major technology company in the country. We have something like $3.5 trillion of market capitalization walking in the door today, and we don't keep records on these sorts of things, but I doubt if that's ever happened before here in the White House. And they're coming for 4 hours of working sessions. So this isn't just a photo op, and this is roll up your sleeves and get serious.
Would you say that, does it bother you that 95% of the people that walk in today have not voted for President Trump and in maybe a couple of cases resist him?
Oh, we've actually been incredibly encouraged by how positive people are on this topic, and they're really enthusiastic. Every one of the CEOs is bringing what we call a +1, who's a domain expert, and they're really just thirsting to get involved in this, and as I say, they're committing the whole of the afternoon.
But Chris, you know that a bunch of these tech guys were really steamed that the president talked about exiting the Paris Climate Accords, and a couple of months ago weren't crazy about the president's temporary travel ban.
Well, I think the fact that they may disagree with us on some topics and yet still be willing to come and focus a whole afternoon on this just speaks to how committed they are to this particular subject. So everyone is coming here for the better of the country. Everyone is putting aside whatever differences they might have to make life better for the average citizen. So I actually think that speaks to the strength of the topic.
And what does it say about the president? He's allowing people to come in and talk and sit down with them and hear about their differences with him.
Absolutely. Yeah, we are willing to bring people in here. We want the best minds. And as I say, we have virtually every major technology company represented. So this is about making the country better.
And lastly, Chris, will we get a one-page or a summary of what each contributed, what comes out of this?
Yeah, we have 10 streams of work, and each one of those 10 streams of work has been asked to come with a summary. So it's pretty comprehensive, but we will have a full summary at the end of the day.
All right. Well, good luck today. I know you're the director. It's led by Jared Kushner. Today is the first meeting of the American Technology Council. We wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you.
It would be great if a lot of stuff that we currently have to fill a form out, you could do on an app-based smartphone.
Or do it one time and then it's in the system, so you don't have to do it time and time again.
I like wasting a lot of time on forms. This is going to be this is a very sad day for me.
Well, then you should be very pleased with how we're running right now.
Yeah, you have a lot of time on your hands, don't you? 3 hours of TV, 3 hours of radio, a family.
Not really. So I just give up on the family. I just focus on my forms. Hey, Jillian, what's up?
Good morning. I have no response to that because I feel like someone's going to be in trouble later today.
Okay.
Let's start with this. The number of people hurt in a deck collapse at a Christian camp now up to more than 50 people, 2 of them in critical condition. The frightening incident happening during a memorial service at the Glacier Camp this weekend in Montana. A witness